Okay, I think we'll get started this evening. Welcome, everyone. I'm glad you could all join us. We have 5 board members in the room and 2 are virtual. And I will turn it over to Dr. Stahlo for purpose and agenda.
Excellent. Good evening, everyone. It is great to see you all, and I thank those of you who are listening. The purpose of study sessions is for us to share information and ensure that we are able, and the board is able, to have efficient decision-making with all the information that they need at the board table during regular meetings. This evening, we have Darren Kermis with us from Southwest Metro, and we're going to talk a little bit about a joint powers agreement with a purchase of a building for Southwest Metro Intermediate. We'll also talk a bit and get an update on our enrollment. We will update you on the implementation of our Ready to Learn plan. In addition, we'll be taking a look at the preliminary scorecard data. At this time of the year, we usually talk about our world's best workforce, so we still wanted to bring some information forward to you. And we'll also be talking about an easement to install a Big Sky Development Monument request that came through the Facilities, Finance, and Long Range Planning Committee. We've got several policies that we'll take a look at this evening, and then we will be later moving into a regular board meeting. With that, I'll hand it back to you,
Okay,
Chair Shimmick.
Thank you. The district governance and policy, tonight we'll be focusing on the policies that guide us as a board, our self-governance policies. Well, also, and that's part of our agenda planning, or not agenda, but agenda for the year and our goals, with some brief discussion on enrollment and the scorecard, as Dr. Stahlo mentioned. So moving on to oversight of operations, Southwest Metro Joint Powers Agreement. Dr. Stahlo?
Excellent. I'll go ahead and get started, and then I will yield my time to both Darren Kermes and to Director Melissa Enger, who is the board representative to Southwest Metro Intermediate District. As you all know, we are a founding member of Southwest Metro Intermediate District, and Southwest Metro leases and owns space in order to provide programming that our students use. Unlike the other intermediate districts, we really have a no-wait policy or a zero-reject ability, and one of the reasons that we're able to do that is where there is space for us to be able to do that. So as the space was becoming more tight at Southwest Metro Intermediate, a task force was organized and some research was done to look at the purchasing of a building. Member districts pay a portion of that through our lease levy and long-term facilities maintenance levy. And tonight, Darren is here. I know board members, in your packet, you've got both the resolution and the purchase agreement, as well as the joint powers agreement, and a presentation that you had a chance to take a look at prior to the meeting. I asked Darren to be here this evening to answer any questions or provide any additional context that you may need. As we move forward with, we would need to pass a resolution in order for this to work for Southwest Metro and for us. So with that, Darren, I'll hand it over to you. Thanks for being here this evening.
Is it?
You're presenting.
Thank you. Well, good evening. Thank you for taking the time to both consider this resolution and to allow me to speak today. I see that Board Member Enger is on the line here, so she can speak a little bit to what the board has done. But in a nutshell, Southwest Metro has 11 member school districts. As Dr. Stahlo mentioned, Prior Lake Savage is one of the founding members. We have programs in Jordan, in Shakopee, in Chaska, up in Buffalo, Waverly, Minnesota, and in Prior Lake we provide services at Passageways. So with those programs, as our member districts are growing and filling up your schools, our programs, our buildings are filling up as well. So we have, one of our hallmarks is that we have a zero waiting list, zero reject for any student that needs our services that a member district wants to place with us. The only way to do that is to have room. And so I don't want to mislead you in any way. We are not full today, but we're getting this close. And so we brought together a group that included board members, superintendents, and staff, and had them take a look at our existing facilities, take a look at all of our programs, confirm that we are this close to being full, and so we looked at solutions. One of the things we looked at was building from the ground up. And a piece of information that I shared, that's what 3 of the other intermediates have done. Intermediate 287 in the past 10 years has spent almost $51 million. Intermediate 916 has spent $82.5 million to do the same thing. Intermediate 917 has spent $8 million. We've spent 0. And so that's where we are at the point where we need to grow some space. But rather than building new from ground up, we thought it would be much more fiscally responsible to look at existing opportunities. We have programs in the Town Square Mall. There is space to lease there. However, it's not they've been wonderful landlords to work with, but it's not a wonderful facility. We own a share of the Valley Green building, Valley Green Workforce Center in Shakopee. The Scott County programs are moving out. We could have bought more of that. Interestingly, though, the cost per square foot was more than the Dean Lakes building that we're looking at here, which is why we're bringing this forward. Dean Lakes is located, if you're familiar with Shutterfly, right off 169. It's right there. It's a 100,000 square foot building, 2 levels. It's gorgeous. Some of you have been there. I know Board Member Franz has been there and seen it in action. It's a beautiful facility, and it will take minimal amount of investment on our part. We're projecting $1.25 million to retrofit it. The reason being, this was a tech company. It was their corporate headquarters, so it's already set up with office space, and it was their training center. So there are beautiful rooms set up that are classroom size with whiteboards and electric in the floor for laptop computers to plug in, and power screens and projectors. So it's all set and ready to go for us. But that is the building we're looking at. In terms of financing, believe it or not, we can do this at 0 net impact to your local taxpayers, assuming that you use us the same in years forward as you are right now. Because our districts pay for our buildings and pay for the maintenance and pay for our Safe Schools levy by percentage of use, proportion of use of all of our programs. Well, on your local tax statements, that's added together into one figure. I liken this to, you have a used car that has served you well for many, many years, but you're getting to the point where you're starting to have to do shocks and brakes, and you're putting a lot more into maintenance, even though you're no longer making car payments. Here, what we're looking at is buying I like to buy my cars on a 2-year lease return, right? So you're buying a not brand new, but close to new building, where those maintenance costs are going to be greatly reduced. So on our overall books, our lease levy will go up because this is to buy this building. But we are reducing our long-term facilities maintenance dollar for dollar. So at the end of the day, it's a push across, and so for Prior Lake Savage and the other 10-member districts, your local taxpayers, again, assuming same use of our programs, will see 0 net tax increase because those numbers will offset. So that is, we believe we have the need. We believe we have found the best option, better than all other options considered, and we believe we can do it in a fiscally responsible way to serve kids. And we believe it's great for kids because instead of being in a 50-year-old mall, this is a 10-year-old state-of-the-art building where kids can come and be treated with respect and be treated like they are in your beautiful buildings. And I'd certainly stand for any questions that you may have.
Before we ask any questions, Melissa, did you have anything to add at this point?
Thanks, Lee. I 100% support, can you hear me?
Yep.
I 100% support what Darren had said. This is a wonderful opportunity for the combined districts under the Southwest Metro to get into a building that has been completely vetted, net 0. It's going to be a great opportunity. We're really fortunate we got this in the end here. Things really did pan out for us. So completely agree that we need this. We need to move forward with the joint powers agreement.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Stacy?
Darren, just as far as programming, I know you're in a couple spots right now, 2 or 3. You said, like, as far as
far as
Town Square Mall and Valley Green, are they offering services at both those places right now, or?
Yes.
Okay, so just from a programmable standpoint, is there any you know, anything that we're losing by not having a second site in the sense of someone's accessibility or to a different spot or anything like that, just because we're 11, you know, the area.
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't believe so, since they're both in Shakopee. I think, you know, if one was maybe in New Prague, or, you know, even one here in Prior Lake and one in Shakopee, and then you could say, well, but we're taking one out of a community. The two we're merging are both in Shakopee.
Okay,
So our current site is the Valley Green site. That's where we have our adult basic ed programs. And this building is half a mile, I mean, or maybe a mile at most away. So it's right next to that building, right off 169. So everything that we have at Valley Green, which is our district office and our adult basic ed programs, would move into Valley Green, and we would sell that building. In the Town Square Mall, we have our day treatment program that we partner with Scott County Mental Health and Human Services. That program would be moving in. We have our special ed transition program for young adults with disabilities who are 18 to 21. That program would all be moving in. We have what's called a PAYS lab, which is for persons with disabilities where we need to get a gauge on their vocation, their aptitude in different areas. That's available to high school students, where they do come, they're bussed in for about a quarter at a time, and they go. That will move from the mall right over here. We are freeing up a little space in Chaska. We have the original Chaska High School is one of our facilities, and we have most of our career tech programs over there. One of the things we'd like to do is bring some career tech programs into the Shakopee site. First of all, it's a little closer for some of the districts, especially Prior Lake and others that are here in Scott County. But also we want to be able to partner more and have those career tech opportunities for some of our young adults with disabilities and for our adult learners. So we were looking to bring some of those criminal justice, medical careers, intro to education. That brings programs over, but it also frees up some space. We are full in the 401 building, which is the Chaska site. So this then creates space there as well. So by doing this, we move out of the other sites. We move into a single location. It streamlines busing. It streamlines other pieces. It's right on 169, so the bus routes would be easy. And then it allows us to bring some things from other buildings that are full into this one, which then allows us to, you know, have several more years with the 401 building in Chaska before that building is full. Now we can take some of the pressure off that building as well.
perfect, thank you.
Any other questions? Mary, do you have a question?
I don't have a question, I just have a statement. As Darren pointed out, I have seen the building. I'm familiar with the services because I sat on the Southwest Metro for my first 2 years here on the board, and it's an incredible opportunity. I've seen the building before it was vacated. They left pretty much everything intact, almost everything down to the wire, and even some exercise equipment, I believe, right?
They did take the exercise equipment, but they have left. There are 3 or 4 of the boardrooms that are fully outfitted with a full conference table and
Right.
chairs, and the power screens, everything else is left intact.
Everything was state-of-the-art before, nothing really has changed. I think this is an incredible opportunity, and by the way, it's a great deal as far as real estate goes right now with that quality of building and the location. So very much for this, and really glad that the Southwest Metro is able to capitalize on this opportunity.
Anyone else? It sounds like most of us are in support of this.
No.
I would like to suggest that we add this to our agenda this evening and take a vote on it. So that would move it up 2 weeks from what we'd normally planned. I don't think you'd be opposed, Darren?
No, I would be doing little cartwheels on the way out. Which is something,
So, following this work session, we will be having a board meeting, and we'll add it to our agenda to take a vote. So, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much for being here this evening to explain more to us.
Great, thank you for the time.
Okay, now we'll move on to the enrollment update levy certification with Julie Sink.
Good evening. So tonight, I'm just going to go over our preliminary levy certification. And as you know, as part of the levy certification, this is the preliminary certification. And Usually we ask the board to vote on the maximum certification simply because there's still adjustments that are being made to our levy certification even today. So we are, so as I go through this, there's a calendar that's involved as well with this preliminary levy certification that the board will have to have a final levy certification in December so that it'll certify the levy for next year. As I go through this, we'll just talk about the levy cycle, the basic school funding, any factors contributing to our levy change, the actual certification, and some analysis. And I started to talk a little bit about this already. I was a little ahead of myself tonight. So as the board, we go through this, the board will certify the levy right now in 2022. This will be collected from the taxpayers in 2021, the calendar year of 2021. The school district doesn't recognize this revenue until the 21-22 school year. So right now, we are doing the work to receive revenue for the levy for next school year. So as we go through this process, we're already looking at next school year revenue. So a school district tax levy is a lot different than counties and cities. Our tax levies are either set by state formula or voter approved. We aren't setting levies for anything that's outside of those two areas. The basic formula for calculating our state aid is our total authorized revenue minus our local property taxes, and the remainder is state aid for. And then calculating some impacts or changes to our taxes, any local decision or state level decisions, if there's changes in that by legislature, changes in sales ratio impacting our adjusted net tax capacity, and any laws mandating any code compliance. Issues determined by district voters, any bond referendums, excess levy referendums, and capital projects levies, which are also, you would know it more closely as a tech levy. And then any local factors, inflationary pressure on the real estate market, abatements, property improvements not previously taxed, change in the individual assessed market values, and any change possibly in classification, homestead to rental or something like that. So what is included in our school district levy certification? Voter approved referendums, levies set by the state formula, which we talked about, and you can see the list of those items, and then any levies authorized by the state based on local need. So reemployment, safe schools, achievement and integration, those types of things are what we have a discussion about quite a bit as we're working on our budget. So for this year, our adjusted net tax capacity increased by 7.2%, and our referendum market value increased 7.1%. It's important to note that those are big increases, and they have been increasing quite a bit. If we, as we go through this, you'll see the graphs. But we also, for the first time in years, we have a decreasing pupil units. And so that also is reflected. So you can see our adjusted net tax capacity, the last fiscal year that we have full data for is the calendar year of 2019. So that's the last year that we have an adjusted net tax capacity. So that's kind of like the tax capacity of the entire district. All the valuations of all the properties in the district have increased. And then the referendum market value is different from the adjusted net tax capacity because if we have a referendum, this is what the market value of this is what's based on. This is also increasing by over 7%. And here we talk a little bit about enrollment. So we have the last 5 years, or the last 4 years of final enrollment data. You can see last year we ended the year with 8,815. We had budgeted 8,800. So we had a few more students than we anticipated at the end of the year last year. As of right now, we actually have fewer students than we ended the year last year. If you recall, in July, I had come to the board and said we're 80 students above what we anticipated. And simply due to COVID and everything that's happening here with, that has really had a negative impact on our student population. So currently we're at 8,000, and this isn't even true anymore because we have adjusted it at the end as of As of Friday, we were 8,768 students. We lost 10 more students last week. And so I anticipate that we'll continue to lose a few more students as we get closer to that October 1 number. And you'll know as we go through and we'll start talking about budgets, the effect of this. But also what I've done for our levy certification is I've updated those numbers. And so you'll see those if you ever were to go out on MDE's website, you'll see our numbers have started to go down, and then we have to determine some next year numbers as well. So our enrollment history trend, you can see where we are growing district, and now we're at this odd spot, simply due to COVID, I believe. So we're seeing that downward trend. And then we talk about our preliminary levy certification. And so there's three components of this. There's our general fund levies, there's our debt service levies due to voter-approved bond referendums, and then there's community education. So this first piece is our preliminary levy certification for the general fund portion of it. And you can see that's increasing 4.38%. A lot of that has to do with reemployment. Some of that, we've had to increase that number. We've not had to do that in the past. I've increased that significantly. Our leased facilities are going up significantly as well, simply because we're now kicking into the MnCAPS leases, and those kinds of things are showing up now on our, and we dropped off last year the old lease for the ALC, and now this is increasing, so we have that change there. And then achievement and integration levy, we have increased as well. And so those are the big pieces that are part of this. Our local optional revenue, if we want to just start going through all of these types of things, our local optional is what's increased this year. And if you can look and you can see the offset is the levy referendum. That's gone down a little bit. Our levy referendums, we did have it set at 923. The legislature changed that and took $300 out of that, and now it's at 623. Our local optional went from 424 to 724. So there's a difference there. Equity levy is how our district compares to other districts in the metro area. So that really looks at where are we between the 95 and the 5% of the metro area. How is our revenue compared to all of those? And our revenue is low, and so you see we get quite a bit of money in equity levy. However, that's going down slightly this year or staying pretty stable. Same with our transition levy. That's really old. Just tells you that you're held harmless for any old legislation that's happened in the past. It's a very small number. And you can see our operating capital levy is increasing. Our long-term facility maintenance is increasing about the same amount. And the rest of those items, our Q-comp is increasing as well, because we had more staff last year. It's based on prior year teaching staff. And so those numbers have changed, and so you'll probably see a change again next year if our numbers change. So that's what that looks like for our general fund. If we go to community ed, there's a big change here and simply an extended day disabled as we work through. That is, extended day disabled is for our students that are qualify for special ed that need extra help. We levy for to help us, we can levy for this to help provide staffing for those students. And then our debt service, you can see that that's increasing about 2.55% for our total debt service. In the past, we've had $1 million reduction in debt excess, and this year it's $800,000. That's been a higher number in the past, but at this point, with everything happening with COVID, I'm not really sure what's happening. We have to, by law, have 5% higher number than we have in debt service payments. By reducing our excess, if we were at about 15%, we're down to 10. I could do it lower, but if, that's a decision the board would have to make if they want to decrease it any more than that. With things happening, I'm not sure of what's happening in the collection of taxes. We've never had a problem in the past. I don't really anticipate it, but I think it's a very good safety net to have that money there at this point to make sure that we can pay our bonds. So overall, it's a 3.68% increase in our levy certification. That does not necessarily mean that our revenue is going up, because if you recall, our total levy for our general fund is only a small portion of it. And it's mainly debt service. So about 15% of our total general fund revenue is coming from levy. So when we increase that 15%, that's what that looks like for our general fund. And otherwise, it's totally 100% covering our debt service costs for the district. Any questions about that? So it's not an overall, like I said, it's different than counties and cities where they're really budgeting based on this for their budgets. That is not true for the district. This is only a small portion or a portion of the district's budget. Here's our levy limitation. You can see our local is 7%. State determined of our levy itself. 7% is local, 29% is our state determined, and 64% is voter approved. Our 10-year levy history, as you can see, we've kept it fairly low over the last several years, except for the year where we had a vote in a bond referendum. Any questions?
Questions from the board? This will come back
At the board meeting.
in December.
This will come
At the
back
meeting,
tonight
and then
for approval, and then
right.
in December again,
Right.
correct?
Okay, I'm
For
sorry.
a final.
Okay. Jonathan?
Julie, could you reiterate for me this portion of our overall budget is roughly a quarter of our overall budget?
Of the
our
operating funds,
revenue?
when we say operating funds, if you look at our, like our audit, if you look at operating funds, it's Fund 1, 4, and 7.
Mm-hmm.
So general fund, community ed, and debt service, it's about 25% of that total budget.
Okay,
For
so
all
it's-
of those.
I think it's important that for the folks that are listening, that this is not a 3.6% increase to our overall budget.
No, it is not.
This is a portion of that. And as I look, less a question and just a comment, when I look at the 10-year history, and today I pulled up just my own property taxes and what it has been for the school district. And over the past 3 years, while we've seen 3 consecutive increases in our levy, my taxes have gone down. And I know that that's not going to be everybody's, but the tax base is growing. I think percentages and dollars. I think most of the public want to know what does this cost me in dollars, not a percentage. And odds are your dollars, in many cases, might actually be reduced next year.
So when you think about our increases in our adjusted net tax capacity and our referendum market values going up 7%, the district's levy certification is only going up 3%. So most likely, most people will see some sort of decrease in there because that amount is spread over all of those properties and that dollar amount or value of those properties.
One other question, if I could?
Yes.
Or just, I guess, an observation and your reaction to it. But I was quickly looking at the enrollment numbers, and from last year to this year, the total number at this moment is down 37 students outside of the 10 that you said we just added. 87 are down at elementary grades. We're up at secondary. Just looking at it myself, it appears as though we've lost people, understandably, because of the situation, because of COVID and choices to make a better decision for their family than our hybrid model or our distance or a need for childcare or something like that. I'd be optimistic that we see some of those folks back.
Right, so of our total budget, as we look at our total, what we budgeted for this year, we budgeted 125 more students. So we're actually down from our budgeted amount.
200 kids.
Right.
Yeah.
So we are down quite a few from our budgeted amount. Of those that are down from our budgeted amount, the majority of those are in the elementary. So it's over 200 students that we have less today at the elementary level than we did last year. And we do have you're right, we are increasing. We have about 18 or 20 students at the middle level that were up actually over last year. And our high school, right now, we're about 60 students above what we were last year. Now, we're in the middle of September.
Sure.
Or we're towards the end now, I guess. We're at the end of September, so we'll see what that October 1 number ends up being. And I hope it stays pretty steady there for our upper secondary level. But we are down a
Yeah,
lot at
yeah.
our elementary. And yes, that we certainly hope that those students come back if we were able to go back to school as normal, and people that have those needs for their students to be somewhere every day would want to come back to our district.
Certainly. Thank you for the update.
Mary?
Yes, so I'll start off with the enrollment question. So I do have a couple of questions. One is the total enrollment that we put on the enrollment history trends includes open enrolled, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
There's a lot of components when it comes to the levy certification.
Right.
The levy certification has resident students as well as attending.
Right.
So there's both.
And when we take a student from another district, do we get their full taxes or they're just their,
Just the aid for those.
Just the aid,
For the,
okay.
we get the aid for those students. We actually claim all of those students as part of our district. So we get aid and levy for those, all of our students.
that's what I was going to ask. So we get levy for them because they're counted within our district.
Right.
But if there's a levy in the other district, that does not come over?
No.
Okay. And then about the growth, it looks like resident district, we grew about 50 last year total by the end of the year?
Correct.
Okay, and then this year, of course, is kind of an anomaly anyways.
Definitely.
Yeah. And then, so I thank you for that clarification. And we're about at 13% or 12% average OE for that, right?
For the current year?
For
Or
the
what are you
last-
asking me? I'm sorry.
No, just for, well, I think this year is kind of an anomaly. So if we look at just last year, that's about a good percentage.
Right, but we also lose quite a few students as well. So the difference is about 3.5%.
Well, no, I meant just a total, because I'm talking about the money that we have coming in.
Correct. But
Okay.
you also can't forget we lose students, so that money is going out
No,
as well.
I get that. We've been positive on that, though, for some time.
Right.
So that's, I just wanted to clarify that. Then, on the, I think it was the equity levy, could you just explain how that works with, I was listening to what you're saying, and what I'm trying to do is, and this question, it was an adjusted pupil unit amount of basic revenue and transition revenue, and that's what the equity levy, it's actually more the,
So the equity levy is all about every district receiving the same amount of money for students. So that's why some districts get a lot more money in equity revenue than other districts do. So our percentage is usually between the 5 and the 95 percentile. We're usually somewhere in the lower range.
Okay.
So 40 to 35, we've been as low as 35% of all of those. And so we get more money per pupil unit for that equity because we aren't receiving as much money as other districts are.
thank you,
in total revenue.
that's what I was trying to qualify. And thank you for your answer about the lease facility. I assume that was MinCaps based on our history, but I just wanted to make sure. And then we were talking about the reduction in debt service. And one of the questions that I had is, if we don't pay it down, do we actually pay more interest on that? Does it kind of balance out that way? Or if we, like you mentioned, we normally pay $1 million, and this year we're assuming we're going to pay $800,000.
Well, this is actually, what this is giving some money back to the taxpayers.
Okay.
It's reducing our levy. In the past, because everybody or majority of the people in this district pay their taxes, and so we actually get extra money in our fund balance in the debt service fund.
Understand.
And so what we do is we reduce that by that excess. So I request money to the state of Minnesota to say, we have too much money in our fund balance, I'd like to give that back to our taxpayers. In the past, it's been about $1 million. This year, it's $800,000.
Okay,
And so our fund balance was a little lower this year when we finished with our audit for the debt service. And so I just felt it was maybe a time to reduce that. And I just don't know what the future looks like. And so I'm being a little conservative with this and saying, if we do end up in a position where maybe the economy isn't as good as we anticipate that it would be, then this would be just a little extra reserve that we would have in our fund balance.
okay. Now I know that we've got a payment schedule for our bonds and in the debt service fund. If we had more money in there or paid it down more, would that have an offsetting impact on interest, or does that not make a difference?
I've never heard anybody paying ahead their bond schedule.
Well, I know,
so-
but that's why I understand that. I'm just asking because.
So what
yeah.
what would happen is what I'm really trying to be a little conservative about, if people aren't able to pay their taxes, we would have the money in the account to pay that, even though we aren't receiving as much revenue as we should receive from our taxpayers to pay those bills.
Okay. And then with the increase this year, and I know we're asking for the maximum because we don't actually go back and approve it until December.
Correct.
Last year, we did 1.24%, and that's what we approved, and that's what was suggested, and that's what we kind of came through at the end of the year anyways. So last year's increase, this is a cumulative kind of increase, right? Is this 3.6% in general, or is it 3.6% on top of what we've already done last year? How is that?
Right, it's based on last year's number.
Okay, so it's on top of, okay. Just wanted to clarify that. And then just as far as the amount that we do take local that's not voted upon, I was kind of looking at what we had last year and this year. Do we get about 92 million, I think it is, from the state in aid total with the different, and then the rest is made up by local?
Not quite that much.
Okay.
It's about $80 million, and then it's local, and then there's some federal, and then there's also
Federal, okay.
some local fees that make up the total of our budget. So it's kind of those 4 areas.
Okay, thank you for that qualification.
Anyone else have any questions? Out there? Okay, this will come back then at the meeting later this evening for a vote. We will move on to the Ready to Learn plan implementation. Dr. Stallo.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thanks, Jeff, for helping me out. He'll be joining me as we go through this, as will a few others as well. We're happy to update you tonight, and really our goal this evening, as we look at the outcomes, is to make sure that you understand how we monitor the Ready to Learn plan. Also want to be sure that you understand the process and the data that we use. I know it's really easy for people to look at the Scott County data and see that, and as you know, that's one starting point to how we make decisions about the learning models. And then lastly, I know a pretty robust communication went out to families last Thursday, and I just want to be sure that we get a chance to talk a little bit about that so that board members are really confident and clear about some things as you talk with community members and parents as we move forward. So to start things off, just want to talk a little bit, go one more, Jeff, thanks, on the implementation of the Ready to Learn plan. As we implement the hybrid learning model, I just want to take a moment to remind everyone that this is something that has never been done before. Never before have our teachers been teaching students in front of them, while also teaching and supporting students who are at home, and at the high school level, also adding on that portion of those students that have decided to be 100% online. So I just don't want to minimize what we've been asking our staff to do, and certainly our teachers, but this has also been lots of change and lots of newness and lots of work for all of our staff, for our support staff, for our custodians, our child nutritious services staff, our district office staff, our paraprofessionals, our transportation folks, our custodians, our office staff, our administrators. We're asking folks to do something that they've never done while we're in a global pandemic. And I know I've said it before, but I want to keep reminding all of us of what we're asking of our staff. I worry about everyone sustaining the energy that this is taking right now from the planning phase into the implementing phase. And I just want you to remember this is a marathon and not a sprint, as Julie said, as she's doing so much to try to plan a budget around all of the unknowns. We're making decisions daily with a lot of unknowns. So I want to make sure that, first of all, I continue to share my gratitude to our staff for everything that they're doing. And just to continue to remember for all of us the importance of collaboration, the importance of remembering that we're all on the same team, administrators, board members, staff, students, and families. We all want excellent education in a safe and healthy way for our students. And I know there's multiple perspectives on how that happens. So just wanted to, again, give kudos to amazing people who are really working hard on behalf of our kids right now. As we implement the Ready to Learn plan, I expect that our leaders are working daily and hourly to ensure that the implementation of a very safe and healthy plan is being done. And I also just want to remind you of some touch points that we have on a weekly basis. Our senior leaders meet weekly. That's our executive directors and directors of all programs. And while we also have other work to do, there's always an update. How are things going? What do we need? What do we need to communicate? How do we need to intersect with our schools? In the same way, learning leaders who are all administrators and teaching and learning administrators also meet weekly. And again, every time we meet, our purpose in coming together is to coordinate action so that we can achieve our strategic directions, which ultimately helps us achieve our mission. And while that work of our district priority work is continuing, the focus of our work also is on the implementation of this plan. So I just want to remind you that we've got those regular checkpoints and touch points weekly. In addition to that, we are meeting weekly as an incident command team where we provide reports and review data on an ongoing basis. And you can kind of see on this slide the list of the data points that we take a look at. And we'll talk a little bit about that later on. I've asked Joe and Jim to share some additional information around that. But just wanted to give you a sense that certainly we are monitoring data in multiple areas daily, weekly, and responding to that data, but wanting you to know that as we're implementing this Ready to Learn plan, we're certainly paying attention on a regular basis of everything that needs to happen. So with that, I just want to talk a little bit about, we've been asked about the process of what we do review and how we look at our current ability to sustain the model that we're in, or if we look at, is it a time or when is the time to shift models and turn the dial. So as I said, I sent out some information Thursday and want to make sure that you have a high degree of confidence around that with some shared understanding. As the Minnesota Safe Learning Plan calls out, the starting point of that data is the Scott County data with those number of cases per 10,000. And that certainly is the starting point that we look at, but then we continue to look at others. Again, last Thursday when we met with Scott County Health officials do not recommend moving out of the hybrid model yet at this point. And I understand that there are people who are looking at the data and saying, but the data is below 20. And the reminder that I'll share with you now, and I'll probably share a couple more times, is, yep, we still are under 20. Remember the data that we have to date, none of that shows any kind of impact for when we've been in school, and you'll see that in just a minute. So again, just as a review, the guidelines, the parameters that we see there, And really what we'll be talking about now is looking at that below 20 that we've been in Scott County, and looking at that really, as we move forward, if that data is sustained along with all the other factors that we're going to talk about, at what point can we transition to a K-5 in person? The next slide shows just a little bit, again, that's the trend data that we've seen from Scott County over the past several weeks. And that last data point that comes up, that's the projection. So that's not the data point yet, but every week when we meet with Scott County Health, we talk about the current number, and then they also forecast for us a projection. And at this point, when we met with them last Thursday, they projected not at least 18 being the number for this week. Again, we'll find out more about that later in the week. We'll get that real-time data again, which will take us into the first week that students were in session, and then we'll also see what that projection is. So if it continues to stay under 20 and the projection also continues to stay under 20, then that data point is one that becomes a little bit more solid. If it can stay under that 20 point, that would be absolutely fantastic.
Hey, Dr. Stallo, just one thing, and just to ask you to reiterate, is one of the reasons from the conversations with Scott County Health, the reason being the data that we have is because several districts, either they haven't had students in school or they've been slowly ramping up depending on which hybrid model that they're implementing. And so is there belief that, as more kids come back in, because that seems to be a trend nationally, that they may project a spike going up. So really, while this is a promising trend, or a promising trajectory, I guess, I'm not sure we're at a point where we can say trend, but a promising trajectory, that we really do need to, the next several weeks of once students are fully in school to the extent possible with a hybrid plan, engaging what impact might happen as a result of COVID, this is really a key indicator for us as well as all districts.
Absolutely. I appreciate you saying that, Jeff. And I think that's that question right now of saying, we have just been in school 2 weeks. We don't have, and you're right, some of the Scott County districts did start before the 14th of September, so they would have been in school a bit. But for us, especially right now they're saying stay the course, and we're certainly all monitoring and continuing to look at if this holds, then at what point can we hopefully get our kindergarten through 5th grade students back? Thank you. The next slide, and I will ask Jeff and Joe and Jim Quorum to speak a little bit more to some of this, but again, I know it's very easy for families and parents and our community members to have access to that Scott County data. So I understand the questions that folks are saying, well, then why aren't we back? And hopefully what Jeff just said helps people understand that that lag in data is something that we're looking at. We want to make sure that we have stable numbers while students are in session under 20. Additionally, as you can see here, and you saw the same data set earlier, this really is the data that we look at weekly at Incident Command, because regardless of what those numbers are from Scott County, we have to have the staff to be able to operate our buildings. And that's why it's so important that these other pieces, looking at the number of cases and exposures and the staffing that Jim's going to talk about, student attendance rates, principals letting us know how things are going in their building, and then the transportation, custodial maintenance, child nutritious services staff reporting, as well as childcare, all give us the picture of all of the other data points that tell us if we can sustain the model that we're in, if we have what it takes to transition to a different model. So with that, I'd just like to hand it over to Jim Quorum to share some additional insights, especially around staffing.
All right, good evening. Some things related to staffing that I think are important for all of us to keep in mind first, and that is that the Scott County numbers are about COVID cases. However, we haven't hit cold and flu season yet, right? So if someone has symptoms, Joe, right, they're going home, and so I think as you think about that, that's a data set that gives us a guideline as to what we can do. but there's a lot of other factors underneath that related to having people here and present for work. So with that, just a little bit about that. Some of the data points that we're looking at to try to get a really good picture of the trends related to staffing are things like the total number of accommodations and leaves that have been requested, the total number that have been approved, and then what those accommodations are. Like some accommodations we can accommodate in the building, other ones are accommodations to work from home. So if you change a model, that all that has to be looked at, who is present for work and who can work from home, and then what does that do if you change the dial at all, right? We also look at attendance, both of staff and students. We look at sub-fill rates, and we do that, with most of this data, we're looking by employee group and we're looking by building, right? To see if there's hot spots or real needs in some buildings or some programs, so we can kind of keep our thumb on that. Along with that, we are also looking at particularly trends in licensed staff versus support staff, right? And what we're seeing, and I'll get to that in a little bit more in a minute, what we're seeing is we're holding our own with licensed staff. We're doing okay right now with licensed staff. I'd put that in the okay category. Where we're struggling and where the trends seem to be going in the wrong direction is with support staff, both in absences, in fill rates, and in open positions. So as I think about that, you know, all the support positions that support the learning, support the teachers in doing the learning, that's troublesome as we look at that as a trend. So those are the kind of data points that we're looking at, and we're trying to really break it down, like I said, by building, by employee group, so we can see what the trend is each week as we walk through this. But just some trends that we're starting to see, and I kind of let the cat out of the bag there a little bit, but as we drill down, the majority of our open positions are the classified staff, the support staff. Some of that is because we have lots of open positions, and others is we are wondering if the dial is going to change. In other words, if we hire a whole bunch of people and we happen to go to distance learning, well, that puts us in a position sort of like we were last spring, and that's not a place we're ready to be in yet. There is definitely a lack of applicants for those positions that I talked about. When we have openings in food service and paras, kids company, custodial, we have openings in all of those. And some of them are competing. We have people that apply for every one of those jobs. So there's a pool that's looking at that. We're also finding that, you know, currently we're filling most of it where there's some internal filling. So principals are doing a great job of shuffling things around to fill the holes and make it work. Again, I would call that functional staffing right now. It's what happens with the trends with some of these other data points as we go through the next few weeks. And I guess the other thing that I would say, just to end this, at least my part of it, is as we look at that county data again, I believe that's the guidance on what you can do, but I really feel from an HR standpoint that staffing and building capacity, depending upon the model, will decide what you're able to do. All right, so at least from a staffing standpoint, that's the way I look at it, because building capacity is extremely important, along with having enough bodies to pull it off. So, questions on that?
Can we wait till the end of the presentation this time?
Anything else on this one, Joe, that you want to add, or, okay, we'll keep, I think you're coming up, Jeff. Anything else on this in terms of reports from principals or anything else?
You know, I think certainly there seems to be a lot of optimism with kids and staff back in the building. I think that's something that everyone appreciates, enjoying students. I think Dr. Stallo, to your remarks too, I think they're continuing to connect with kids, you know, connect with families. You know, there's the social emotional part, there's the academic part, there's in-person, there's hybrid, there's distance, and so there's a lot of moving components. on the principal side of things. And I think a lot of the things that we planned for, I think we planned very well. And as Jim Querum is talking about, there's some challenges that we have to continue to work through. We still have postings out there. I know we continue to hire as we have a qualified applicants that have gone through the interview process. We get them onboarded as quickly as possible and working with students as quickly as possible as well to address some of those needs that we have in our district.
Great, thank you very much. Just a little aside on that, I got my flu shot at the high school earlier or late afternoon, I guess it was, and got a chance at the end of the day to talk to several high school staff, and, you know, I just said, how's it going? And just really good energy, really positive. Like I said, folks are working hard, but I think everybody's very happy to be with kids, as hard as it is. So just a review again, and my purpose in bringing this to the board and the community tonight is just to remind people of the process that we use, that we're getting this cadence, that we're reviewing the data, that we're having the conversations really throughout the week. We certainly aren't waiting for incident command meeting to talk about something if we need to make an adjustment. And we've certainly found places that we have had to make adjustments in order to make sure that that we're providing the services that our kids need. I also wanted to, on the next slide, I know it's small to be able to see on the screen, but I wanted to provide some information to board members and our community members. I have heard some people say, and I have seen through some communication, people say that Prior Lake Savage Area Schools is the only school district that doesn't have students in school 5 days a week. And that's not accurate. And I think it's very important that we state and that people understand that that's not accurate information. Every district built their ready-to-learn plan and had to make decisions. For every decision that districts made, there was an impact on that. We studied to see what would it take to bring all K through 5 students back more regularly, and what that would have taken for us because of the capacity restrictions and social distancing. It would have been less time for our older students in school because we would have needed to use some of our other buildings to be able to make that happen. And when you think about the dial and going back and forth, that would have been really difficult to turn back on the dial. And we really believe that our older students need to be in school as well. We also don't have some of the staffing that some of our other districts have, where in some cases they're having a pod situation where they might have some of their support staff that are supervising smaller groups of students. It doesn't have to be just a licensed staff, but we don't have some of those additional staff in order to do that. So I think it's really important that the community and the board understand that every district has had to do their own thing. In Scott County in particular, Prior Lake Savage Area Schools and New Prague have models similar where there are no students that are there more than 2 or 3 days a week. In Shakopee, the kindergarten students are there 5 days a week, but the rest of the district is on a rotating hybrid. Our model is very similar to both Lakeville and Rosemont Apple Valley. Again, I know those aren't Scott County schools, but they certainly border us. So I just wanted to be really clear on that to make sure that people understood that that is not accurate information. The next slide, though, as we talk about the potential, if the data holds, of us making a change, I wanted to be sure that we talked about also the change in requirements from a hybrid to an in-person learning model, and that also is a change in how we will do some of the contact tracing, which I think is really important for you all to understand as well as families to understand. So Joe, do you want to speak to some of this, please? Thank you.
Good evening. Yeah, one of the things that we've been talking about all along is the importance of education and understanding of our process and protocols for families, staff, and students. Part of turning the dial conversations that we're having is I've been working with our regional support team having conversations about what exactly does that mean for us? What changes does it mean for especially our elementary schools, because that's what we're talking about right now. And the key things that you can see on the right-hand side is when we turn the dial, or hopefully when we turn the dial, from our hybrid into an in-person learning situation for our elementary students, a few things change. And included in that is we no longer need to follow the 50% capacity. So our elementary classrooms will be going back to both A and B students will be there at the same time, meaning we'll be over our 50% capacity, but that is okay because we can do that in our in-person situation. We don't need to follow the 6-foot social distancing at that point because that would not be possible when you have over 50% capacity. Now, one thing we all need to keep in mind, as Dr. Stallo mentioned, is that's going to affect our ability to trace when we have a positive case, as well as going to affect the results of that tracing. So talking about situations we've dealt with so far, we're able to identify an individual who has potentially tested positive because of our protocols that we're following, maintaining that social distancing, the 50% capacity being more than 6 feet apart. Only that individual who has tested positive needs to currently be out. However, we need to understand that that will change in our in-person model. So if we have a situation, it's going to take, first of all, a little bit longer to do contact tracing, but we need to understand that that potentially could take out multiple people, including in a possible entire classroom. If we have one positive case, it is possible that all students and maybe even the teacher may need to be home and do learning remotely for a 2-week period of time. That would also include then needing to see who did the individual sit by at lunch. That could affect another classroom. Who did they ride with on the bus? That could affect some additional classrooms. So I think it's important that as we continue to talk about this turning of the dial, as exciting as it is, we just need to make sure we understand all of those pieces and how they affect what we're doing. So we'll continue to go through that, and that'll all be part of the education for us as the adults, as well as our students as we move forward with that.
Thanks, Joe. The next thing that we just want to talk about really quickly, again, that communication that went out on Thursday had some information in it about if parents want to request a change in the learning model. So again, just a couple reminders and factors that I want us to think about is we need to make sure that our buildings are always ready for that hybrid. And that's where we get to that capacity concern. And I know one of the things that we talked about is because of those safety restrictions, we have to make sure that we don't accept all of those requests and then put us in a position where we are over capacity in our buildings. So that's some of the process that principals will be working with and they'll be looking at really similarly to what they did all August, is taking a look at those request forms and then looking to see how does that divide up with A and Bs, what's that look like with busing capacity, as well as with schedules and classroom capacity. So I know, again, that's been, concerning of some parents that said, well, I might have to be on a wait list. We may not be able to get everybody in, and that is accurate. If all of the folks or a lot of people that were in distance learning only want to transition back into the dial, we definitely will not have the capacity for that, and I know that that's concerning for families, and we're certainly going to do the best we can to make every effort that we can to accommodate those change requests because we want students to be wildly successful. Again, we just need people to understand the capacity restrictions that are on us in that hybrid model especially. Additionally, at the elementary level, and again, I just want to be really clear, and I know this is concerning for families as well, but I want to be sure that we are very clear with what could happen. It may not, but it could. Because our elementary operates as really a separate school, our Distance Learning Academy is a separate school with separate staff and separate students, about 650 of them, Jeff, 680? So it's a large school. But because of that, the staff are entirely Distance Learning Academy or entirely Dial Academy. Now again, if a large number of students move either way, we'll have to move staff with them in order to accommodate, to make sure that we've got the staff to accommodate the change request. If that happens, then we'll really have to look at the existing staff, the existing number of students that we have in each section, and what potentially will happen is that We'll have to shift students and shift staff, so students may not have the same teacher that they had first quarter, second quarter. So again, I know that that's concerning to families, and we will do everything we can to minimize that change. We can't predict what those numbers are going to be of people making a change request and then how that will impact. But just wanted to be really clear with that. At the secondary level, it's a little bit different because our secondary staff do teach home hybrid, in-school hybrid, as well as students that are 100% distance learning. So the issue with the secondary is more around that capacity again, making sure that as we allow people to come into the building from distance learning into the district dial, we're looking at schedules and we're making sure that we're maintaining the 50% capacity because it's a far less likelihood. Well, we can look right now at K-5 coming into in-person. It's a far less likelihood, given the current numbers, that that's going to happen for a very long time with our high school students, them being totally in-person. So we have to maintain the restrictions on the hybrid model. The other two things that I just want to be sure people understand is that really the options and the choice that folks have right now is the district dial. Kind of, we talk about just riding the dial and going back and forth as the case numbers and as we need to make those changes and shift from in-person to hybrid to distance learning, or distance learning only. So if at some point, sooner or later, we shift our model at the elementary level, say, to an in-person, those Distance Learning Academy students will stay in Distance Learning Academy. That's what they have chosen, is to be distance learning or to be in this dial format where it can be hybrid, in-person, or distance learning at any time in the year. So I just want to be clear with that. And then I think on the next slide, the second thing that I want to speak to, because we've also gotten this question, is people have said, what if COVID-19 is over? What if the global pandemic is done? So if that happens and the Minnesota Safe Learning Plan is no longer necessary, then what we'll do is we will work with our public officials, we will work with our staff to see what that transition looks like. I do want to say that it is not going to be so simple as to say, hey, it's over and everybody comes back to in-person as normal. Because again, we have 680 students right now that are in the Distance Learning Academy. If something like this were to happen in March, it would be very disruptive to the entire district and to all staffing and to classrooms to bring 680 people back into the building. So I just want to be really clear that we would do that when we safely and logistically could do that, but that could mean next fall is as early as we could do it. So I just want people to have, to go into this with their eyes wide open. And again, we are doing everything we can to minimize disruption, to provide stability for our families, and we simply are unable to do that in a lot of cases because we are planning with a lot of uncertainty as well. I talked earlier just about those differences between the elementary Distance Learning Academy, really operating as a different school, and the secondary. They are maintaining their 6-period day with their course-specific teachers. So that's a little bit easier for folks to go back and forth, especially the in-person or the dial to go into the distance learning. So just wanted to review that timeline for you in terms of making a learning model change. The form went out today. It doesn't matter if people submit it today or at 9:00 p.m. on October 9th. So there's no race. The wait list doesn't happen, because we get the first people that got the form in don't get the first spot. What we'll do is we'll take a look at all of it together. Principals will take a look at it, take a look at schedules, and then figure out how to accommodate as many of those requests as we possibly can. And then that will, you can kind of see how the process lays out there, and then we'll communicate, and we'll start that change on second quarter. Jeff, anything else before I ask Christy just to speak to the communication? Anything else that we're missing with that at all? Okay.
evening. I just wanted to briefly share with you some information about our district website if you have not seen it yet. And for our viewing public, we have a lot of resources on our website for people. If you go to our homepage, you're sure to find it. Otherwise, you can also type in our URL /COVID-19, and it takes you to our Ready to Learn plan page. On that page, the landing page tells you all about the current model that we're in, hybrid. And then on the left navigation, I can do this, right? Sorry. Is this easier to hear me? Yes. On the left navigation, you'll see the entire Ready to Learn plan laid out for you by the learning model, by departments, how it affects the different departments. And on the very bottom, and what I really wanted to point out to you tonight is an email archive. So I know that we've been sending a lot of district-wide emails to parents, and their inboxes are full from teachers and schools. So for anybody that's worried that they maybe have missed something in their inbox, we're always going to post district emails on this page so that you can track it and make sure you haven't missed anything. All right?
Great, thanks, Christy. That's all we've got for the formal presentation, and happy to take any questions.
Okay, does anyone have any questions? Thank you for the presentation. Mary?
Well, first of all, I re-downloaded the board book, and these slides were not in it. Are they going to be in it? Okay.
Yeah, they are now. I think they were about 4 o'clock this afternoon. It was a little tricky with the timing. We wanted to get the board packet to you on Thursdays, and the incident command team doesn't meet till Fridays, so, yeah.
Okay,
But you've
thank
got,
you.
yep, they'll be in there now. Thanks, Mary.
It is in there. It is in there.
It's in there now.
It's in there now, but I downloaded, I think about 3 o'clock was my last copy, so I must have just missed it. So I want to ask a little bit about, some of the communications that I think most board members have been hearing is about not necessarily that they have to make a decision for the rest of the year, but how soon after the beginning of the year they've been asked to make this decision, really only after the first couple of weeks of school. And it's hard for them to gauge really if their child is a good fit for the models that are out there. Is there any communication or concern or adjustment that is planned on being made based upon that feedback?
Yeah, I think, and I hope we've spoken to it, and I understand it. I understand that concern. I know what it took to get our schools up and running with determining the A-B split and how we did that, the bus schedules, the class capacity, and all of that. And we simply cannot do that 3 more times throughout the year. I think the impact, the biggest concern that we have is really that impact on kids having different teachers, especially at the elementary level, and those things changing. So, I understand that concern. I hope people use the time of the window because it will be 4 weeks by the time that window closes on October 9th. We would have been in school for 4 weeks. And, we certainly understand that things can change. And I think what I said in the communication, we really do need people, to make a decision for the year, and then we know that there are family situations that may change or because of health concerns and those kinds of things, and then we would just ask families to work with principals, on a case-by-case basis. We know with almost 9,000 students, it's hard to have any blanket statements, but we just also know that really the effort that it is going to take even now to change this once is hard, and we have to maintain those health and safety practices around the 50% capacity. So I totally understand the concern, and that's just where we are.
Would it be, was it discussed at all? And again, I know people are all over the board on this. Every family situation is different. Was it discussed at all to delay the permanent choice? Tell people they're going to be in there for a full semester, allow them more time to get used to the scenario, and then change at the end of the semester? Or is that not an option, and why?
We discussed all of it. We
Okay.
discussed all of it, and I guess based on the concerns after I initially said that we needed to not be able to do this 4 times, I made the decision, we made the decision that then let's make that shift as early in the year so that students have the same teacher for the majority of the year. So, yep, we absolutely talked about it. And again, this is one of those things that every district does it differently. Some districts have said you're opting in for the entire year. Some have said, Mary, exactly what you just said, that there's an opportunity for a change at semester time, and this is the route that we went.
And then I was wondering if someone could address our staffing issues in the community ed and the childcare area. I've noticed that we have a tremendous number of open positions there, and I know that that's been an interesting environment to get used to, especially with last-minute changes and directives from the state with one essential parent, two essential parents, and then the all-day care versus just the before and after.
Right. One of the things that, all of those things being true, right? A lot of uncertainty there for that staff of going into something they haven't done before and haven't done it in that building at that time of day and helping kids do distance learning. It took us a week or so to really identify the problems, and the principals and Kelly really stepped up and had some communication to work some of those things out. One of the things that we had been holding on to a little bit was a lot of those positions were open but weren't posted as we began the year to see where the trending was going to go as far as a model is concerned. And one of the things that we did when we saw that they were just understaffed greatly is we opened up a number of those positions that we think we can continue no matter what the dial might bring, as we got a better handle on how many folks we need there. And we've hired quite a few folks, and some of them have experience. They were subs previously or were students that worked the summer and hired them back. So I think we're in a way better spot than we were 2 weeks ago. We still have a little work to do as things change, and there's more solid communication that happens as we look at this as a district-level child care program, not a kids' company program. And I think we've made fairly decent strides in that in the last 2 weeks.
And then I have one last question, and that was, especially with the decision to go full year with the decisions with the parents, we're still hearing quite a bit, and I understand that we're in a unique situation, but the fact that I believe SAGE is not being offered for distance learners, and then also the concern from parents on the music issue, that they have to choose one semester, the other for band. And I'm not sure if that's changed or if what is the status on that?
So the music components at the middle school did change to facilitate that scheduling component.
Okay.
Again, adjusting the dial, going from hybrid to distance or back in person, the schedule of having every other day courses over the course of the year, it would have been tremendously challenging to have kids opting in or going in and out of that schedule, depending on how the dial went. And I know it's not a universally appreciated decision. Particularly if you're playing music, you want that continuity of playing all year round, even if it is only every other day. Certainly we have that's something that I think as we've looked at it, it's not where we want it to go. I mean, we want to maintain some of that consistency, but in currently trying to navigate the practical application of with the dial, that was a decision that we did have to make. As far as SAGE, I believe we are offering SAGE through Distance Learning Academy. So I don't know, I haven't heard that we're not. We are. So.
Yeah, there was maybe it was a previous statement and parents got concerned or something like that in August that they were only going to be able to offer it one way or the other. And I know that there's been a lot of changes, but I'm glad you made that clarification. With regards to music, another question that's come up, and I'm not sure it's already been answered, is when kids opt into a band instrument or something like that in 6th grade, they're often told that it's very difficult if they didn't opt into it in 6th grade to then move on with 7th and 8th grade band and music, and just because of the experience level, et cetera, or they're encouraged not to start brand new in later stages because of the learning gap. Is that being adjusted because of any of this, or has there been any discussion on that?
I think through all of this, we're trying to hold kids harmless to the extent possible in all of the things that we're implementing during the COVID-19. So,
Thank you.
yes, that is our intent all the way through.
Thank you.
And I don't mean to interrupt, but just, I think, Mary, with your questions, I just want to again, just because I'm hoping that there are a lot of parents that are listening this evening, please, if you've got questions, talk to your child's teacher or the building principal. That's going to be the best place to get the most accurate answers possible. So please do that. We are here to serve. We are here to help, and I know those questions are always welcome.
Anyone else have questions? Jonathan?
This one is for perhaps Joe. I see Maureen in the back room. I'm wondering, our supply for staff, for teachers, PPE, all of our stuff, is our use rate? Are we in good shape? Do we still have plenty of it? Or are we getting a sense for, how well we prepared on that front?
Evening. So all of the supplies that were delivered from the Department of Health have been distributed to the sites. Most of the masks have been, so it was shields for 100% of licensed staff and 50% of non-licensed staff. Almost all of the shields for licensed staff have been claimed, not all of them for our 50% of non-licensed staff. We still have over 2,700 other face shields that the district purchased before we got the Department of Health supplies. We also have about 400 cloth masks on top of the supply that we got from MDH, and also several thousand disposable masks. So we're in very good shape. The offices at each building are distributing the supplies to the staff and students as they need them, and they still have many on hand, so we're in very good shape with that.
Perfect, thank you.
Any other
That's all that I had.
questions? All right, any other questions? Michael?
I would just make a comment too for people who are listening, and a thank you to staff, but the first week of school I did go to all of the elementaries and the secondary schools and to Bridges, and for those who don't get a peek behind the scenes of what's going on in the child nutrition area, or kids getting off buses and how that has to be managed, or the way the lunchroom is set and how kids have to rehearse how to go through lunch to stay safe, what the custodians have to do, and if the building's cleaned after the end of the day, nobody can come through that front door anymore. Students have to be able to, if there's any outside programs, go the other way. So the level of complexity and just staying even in a current model is hard, but the idea of switching without realizing how many different things have to adjust. And I know I don't even have a full sense of it, but just to be able to get there and see it and to just say to everybody listening, it is hard to imagine the different levels that have to be addressed. And I do appreciate that we are looking in a very unstable time at creating some sense of stability for our families and for our kids. Everyone wants to be back in school in person. But we have to think about this mental health piece too, and what we're doing. So I just want to thank everybody for the steps they're doing, and just to reassure everyone, the governor did give us 2 points of reference, our county data, and the reason we have local control is because we have internal issues like busing and food service and capacity and staffing, and that's the other part of our decision making. So thank you.
Yeah, I'll wait for her.
Melissa?
Yeah, thank you, Lee. So let's talk a little bit about what Wednesdays look like in terms of, that's what we call our flex day. I'm hearing from staff that it's turned into a staff meeting day, and all the administration is putting all of the weekly meetings into that day. Can you talk to that?
Would you be able to provide, we do have one of our principals here, one of our elementary principals is, I
That
know
was at
there
the
are.
high school level that I'd heard those comments.
So I know that on the flex days, this is a time set aside for collaboration, connecting with students that are in distance learning, students needing additional help virtually. They also have the 2-hour early release where students are going distance learning. So I would anticipate there are meetings. I would anticipate that teachers are connecting with students. But if there are specific issues, I certainly could follow up with Dr. Bezick if you're hearing about it at the high school.
And I just certainly invite the staff to follow up. Again, we've had 2 Wednesdays. I think it's important to note that was not the intent of what Wednesdays are. And right now, as we're doing something we've never done, there might have been some staff meetings, but that certainly isn't what the plan is or what the purpose is of those days.
Michael, did you?
I'll just say I have a 10th grader in the high school, and she's a DLA student, and she has teacher meetings. That's also a time they can really focus on those DLA kids. I know for many of her classes, she has to choose A or B in terms of listening live, but then Wednesday is her focus time, and that's when she's most committed to being online with teachers. So I can say from one high schooler's point of view, it's teacher involvement at that point.
Okay, and then also, Flex Wednesdays, I'm hearing that the buses are running, but there's virtually no one on the buses. Because the people that are coming, the students that are coming into the schools are students that have, some of them have special needs, and they're having meetings with their parents, so their parents are driving them in, but I'm hearing that the buses are empty and running on Wednesdays. Can you give us more background there, please?
So yes, as Dr. Stallo mentioned, the first couple Wednesdays have been lighter as staff are working with students. We will start having more students ride the buses. I know elementary has a plan where there was a communication that went out last week so that students will be coming in, working with their teachers. I anticipate our secondary teachers will be doing the same thing. Students coming in for additional help, or maybe coming in for more project-based or lab-based content areas where there is that time for them to complete those and work on those things. So we anticipate that there will be more students riding the bus and taking advantage of that transportation.
Okay. And then if we can talk about the 7,000 students, that's the 4 or 5 that are doing the hybrid currently, the bulk of our district. I'm hearing from the frontline staff, and again, especially at the high school, that they're not at boiling point with balancing and juggling everything, but they're actually boiled over, was the term that I had heard. Terry, you said that you were in the building the other day.
Today, and talked to 5 staff. And again, I started this presentation with both gratitude and the acknowledgement that this is hard. So if, as staff are working, and that's why we have building instructional leadership teams, and that's why we believe in shared leadership in this district, is if staff have ideas of how we can do some things differently to serve quality education in a global pandemic, I'm confident our principals are open to that, and that's where I would encourage staff members to start, is with their building principals.
So if we could go back to the slide on factors to consider, I'm not sure what that was. It was right after we show the dial. Factors considered, maintaining our buildings slide. There we go, thank you. I think what we're hearing loud and clear from our parents is that, we can't hide behind the fact that the virus is here, but we have it now. But we don't have, as of last week, and I didn't hear the number for tonight. How many cases of COVID have we had in the student population? Is it still at 0?
No, it is not at 0 anymore. We have had both student and staff cases.
And how many students?
Just today, we had 3 totals combined between students and staff.
Okay. We're hearing from students, or excuse me, from parents loud and clear that we have to have some form of normalcy for the safety of our children's education, for their emotional growth, and deliver some sort of joy and happiness that can only be found in the classroom. If we take a look at the factors to consider slide in front of us, if we were able to meet with the Minnesota Department of Health and start looking ahead, because we're under 20 cases in Scott County, which, by the way, the governor said is only guidance, that we can make that decision as a local school district. If we start getting wheels in motion and planning for where we're at right now and getting that live in person. I mean, the kids are on the bus together, for gosh sakes. They're now going to be playing high school sports together. We're hearing from the parents that they want to get the show going here again. And it would relieve the pressure that our teachers are having. We've got lots of time to make up. And we're definitely within that range. And we need to get back within 2 or 3 weeks here. Something changes, we can definitely keep it the status quo. But our kids are doing nothing on Wednesdays. They're riding skateboards, playing in trees, which is great to be outside, but we've got educational misses to make up from last school year. And now 2 days a week, they're on a computer for 2 hours, and we're missing out again.
So I just do want to just say that, and again, for people that are listening, students are responsible in doing learning on Wednesdays. And while some students, I talked last week to a distance learning academy teacher, and you're right. The schedule that she has at the elementary level is that kids are not in front of the screen they meet with her for about 2.5 hours. Please understand that that doesn't mean they're not learning the rest of the time. Just like before COVID, there were students, unfortunately, at least when I was teaching, there were some students who were probably sitting in my room pretty passively and not on task learning the entire time. So I just want to be really cautious during this pandemic of doing something very differently, that our students are learning differently, but just because they might not be sitting in class every day as they have been, that doesn't mean they're not learning.
We've got second graders on iPads. I've heard from parents that said, we want them in front of the teacher in the classroom for their health, emotional learning. We just have to get on with this.
Jonathan?
For one, what I heard tonight is that we are preparing and that we have plans and we are ready. I have conversations with people in the community as well. One of them today, somebody asked me, how come the person who is most strongly advocating for us to send our kids back to school does not come to your board meetings during this time of a pandemic? So I would throw that question out. We have a plan. When we are ready, when we are prepared to, I am confident that our students will come back safely when the time is right.
Jonathan, let's talk about that since you brought that up. I appreciate that. The last meeting that I went to, I was chastised for what I had over my face. I can't breathe in a mask. I have a medical condition. And my nose wasn't covered. And I was chastised by another board member. So that's the reason that I am at home, because I can't be there. We're 6 feet apart from each other. We should be able to have a mask off. I mean, the kids are riding the bus together. Let's talk about that. They're riding the bus together. They're going to be doing sports together now. The Minnesota State High School League has put it forward there. We're sitting at the grocery store together.
And again,
We're
I'm
doing
confident.
everything together.
Again, I'm confident that what we just heard tonight was that everybody's objective is to bring our students back when it can be done safely. I think we're all on the same page.
Great. So let's get it back together. I think we've proven that we've been able to do distance learning. We did it last spring. We've got families, 1 in 5, that want to continue doing that. That's great. We've proven that. But if we're looking to prove something else, that we can continue to do this, is this, some people have said, hey, is this for somebody's resume? Let's get this, let these
What
kids
does that
get back
mean?
to-
Melissa,
What does that
you're getting
mean?
your comments are getting a little off base here. And I'm gonna cut you off right now, and I'm sorry if you feel like you're being cut off, but I'm going to. Your
And Lee, I would beg to mention Jonathan's comment to me.
He
That
stated
was
something that he's heard,
inappropriate.
he's
I
stated something
stated-
he's heard from the community, that's all he stated.
Karen asked me
And all
that
I
tonight.
said is I've heard from the
Stop,
community as well.
stop,
There's no difference.
right now, stop. This is getting a little out of control, and it's getting more personal than it should be. We're talking about our community's kids and how we can get them back into school. And there is a plan that's been worked on, it's continuing to be worked on, it's based on data, it's based on what this district can do to get the kids back in school. You're implying, from what I understand, that the administrators have done nothing up to this point, and we're supposed to start tomorrow to get school going again. That is absolutely not true. I have personally witnessed the time that's being put into the programs to get kids back in school. Dr. Stallo outlined tonight some of the parameters that we need to have in place in order to get the kids back in school. And honestly, no one, including yourself, has a crystal ball to know what the numbers are going to do, what's going to happen the next few weeks. We have no data for the first week of school in Prior Lake Savage Area schools. We don't know what's out there. Last time we had a report from Joe, there was no COVID cases. Tonight there's 3. So things change. So I guess I would like to now move on to any other board members that have anything that they would like to comment on, and we're going to move on with our agenda. Stacy?
No, I would
You're
just,
done?
I was just gonna say, I fully appreciate all the bringing forward the factors to consider, you know, as we had some questions about that from the community. And I fully support what we're doing in the sense of, you know, listening to the Scott County health officials as far as the trend data. I think going against something like that would lead us down a dangerous path, and I'm not willing to bet the health and safety of all of our staff and students on that.
Enrique, we haven't heard from you. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Thank you, Lee. So I really appreciate the presentation and seeing where we are, and appreciate Joe providing the additional context of where we are, especially in terms of positive COVID-19 cases. While the bulk of the presentation is focused on general education, I would like to reiterate that we do need to see what this looks like with respect to special education. We are just a few weeks in, so I expect that it will take some time to figure out what that looks like, especially for those Distance Learning Academy learners that do require additional services. But it is something that I am also hearing from the community of, okay, what does this look like, and when will we find out more about what this is going to look like? So not exactly something that I anticipate anyone answering today by any stretch of the imagination, just general feedback that I would like to see that coming forward in the weeks to come.
I believe there'll be continual communications coming from the administration. I do know they meet more than once a week. Details are looked at every day, maybe every hour. When I've been in here, it seems like that's what's going on. So more communication will be coming. I encourage parents to continue to watch their email, Schoology, wherever else it's coming, social media from the district. And I do want to say that I believe strongly that there's no one in this room or in the district that doesn't want kids back in school. I believe this board 100% supports getting our kids back in school, but we have to be able to do it safely. We have to have all of the players in place, so to speak, and then move on from there. So, Michael, did you want?
I just wanted to make a follow-up comment or observation or two. And one is, it's real easy to come to the table and us to say, well, I'm hearing this from parents, and parents are telling me this. And just for those listening, the best way to get direct answers for your child's specific situation, while we can listen to your concerns, is to go directly to your building principal. And they can direct you to who you need to speak to after that. And if you do reach out to us, we all know that we're supposed to direct you to the right person too. So it's hard to come to the table and, you know, I know we all talk to different circles or meet different people, but really to redirect those efforts to your building leadership so you get those most accurate answers. And then just to remember that Dr. Stallo started by saying we're all in this together. So we should be collaborating and being on the same team. That doesn't mean not asking questions, but it does mean we all want kids back in school. We have to work with our district staff, our teachers, everybody else. And I hear a lot of strong emotion and a lot of strong questions. We can also come in between meetings and say, you know, set up a meeting with Dr. Stahl, or ask her if you can set that up with her and Joe at the same time. Work through some of this stuff so that we aren't bringing all that angst just to the table, but that we're working together to really understand each other. So let's remember we're on the same team, and let's remember that, you know, direct people to that correct leadership who can speak to your child's individual case.
Okay, Dr. Stella?
Just one other thing I just wanted to add, and, you know, I'm thrilled at where the county data is, and I just want to thank our staff and our students and our community and our families. The mitigation practices at this point have been working, and I think to the degree that we can continue to do that, we can continue to see those numbers, and that's all gonna help. I do know that our principals, as they report, they said the students have been excellent about masks. So I know that was one of the concerns coming into all of this, was they were really worried about that, and that doesn't seem to have been
Hand washing.
and hand washing, right? Yeah. So thanks for everything that folks are doing in the community to ensure that we can get our students back here as quickly as we possibly can.
Thank you for your presentation. Appreciate it. Move on to the preliminary scorecard update. This is a report only with Chrislyn.
As Chrislyn's walking up, I will just kick it off. Board members, as you know, usually in September, you have already seen the MCA data. So we usually come forward at this time to be sharing some information about the world's best workforce. And we don't have that data, so we still wanted to come forward and go ahead and just update you very briefly just on where we are with some things. So as you know, we always start out with our strategic plan. And everything that we do, including how we assess the outcomes of our students, are aligned to that. So what you'll hear tonight, especially around those strategic directions, are those metrics and those ways that we want to ensure that that happens. And then I'll just take the next slide and then hand it over to Chrislyn. But again, we believe in continuous improvement, and we try to align all of our practices to that. Obviously, our board goals and our district goals are aligned to those strategic directions and the metrics of that. And then we have our building instructional leadership teams and our department teams that really work on our school improvement plans and our department improvement plans in order to make sure that all of the work is aligned and that our arrows are moving in the same direction so that we can ultimately achieve that mission for our students. So from there, I will let Chrislyn take it as she talks a little bit more about some of the scorecard and how we're handling things outside of MCA standardized tests. Thanks, Chrislyn.
Good evening, everybody. The scorecard you saw in a draft version the last time, I think in February, and this is the usual time that the scorecard would come and be presented to the board in public. And clearly this year there are going to be some missing numbers, some missing measures, and then others that won't be missing. As Dr. Estallo said, the main element that we won't see would be MCA results because that assessment did not occur in the spring. And there are still some of these measures that are in progress. For example, the All Students Ready for Kindergarten. That testing is just coming to an end this Friday, and you'll see some of those results in the World's Best Workforce report in the coming months. Your updated board packet has the latest numbers in it. If you'd like to see those closely, I realize that the screen might be a little bit small to see them clearly. But overall, I did want to talk about the benchmarking assessment system that we do have in place. So regardless of if students are able or unable to take MCAs in the spring, we do have a benchmark assessment system that students can take from home. And so this is not a measurement of student attainment of standards, but rather the skills that students need to be able to access that content that they learn in the standards. And that is happening in grades 2 through 8, and that's in both reading and math. So we will be using that assessment. It's called FastBridge Learning. So you'll hear me say FastBridge Learning a lot, and I sometimes abbreviate it with FBL because I use it a lot. So if you need explanation, just stop me and I will explain that. So we are going to be using that data from the fall to be guiding what our teacher teams are doing at the grade level. Our school goals will be aligned to that, because we'll be able to see what happens between fall and then with another measure benchmarking in the winter to the spring. So we will be able to see what happened over the course of the school year. The other difference I wanted to just mention is that the stakeholder survey results, that all came out and was done just before we all changed our lives really drastically with the quarantine. And so we may also make some changes in what the stakeholder survey items are, because some of those may be less relevant in the time that we're currently in, or we might need to bring some others in that would be relevant. So if you see some changes in those, that's what they would likely be. That is all. Do you have anyone have any questions?
For clarification, Chrislyn, you'll be bringing another report back in November?
Yes, sometime before December. Yep.
Okay.
I don't remember the exact date, but
Okay.
yes. Yep,
All right.
that's a World's Best Workforce Report that has those 5 key elements of students being ready for kindergarten, students being at 3rd grade reading level in 3rd grade, closing gaps, being college and career ready, and graduation rates.
Does anyone have any questions? Mary?
Just could you clarify when it says all students are ready for kindergarten for the 1920 school year? Wouldn't that have been the assessments that happened in 2019, or am I misreading that?
All students ready in 1920?
For all students are ready for kindergarten for 1920.
Yep, it's in progress because students are taking that assessment right now to tell us what or how students were prepared during the 1920 school year to start the 2021 school year. So at the end of this week, I'll have that data and be able to put that into the World's Best Workforce Report.
Okay, I'm sorry, I was thinking of that being ready for kindergarten in the 1920 school year, which would have happened last year, but what you're saying, just to clarify, is it's actually this year that you go back. Okay, I understand that, sorry. And then, first of all, with the FBL, with the FastBridge Learning, you know, we've normally done the MAPs and the MCAs and stuff like that. Are we going to try to normalize those results since we're dealing with a different testing methodology? Is there a one-to-one comparison so that we can see the cohort, or how are we planning on interpreting that?
Sure. You mean interpreting FastBridge results, trying to compare it to MAP testing or MCA testing?
Correct. So we see.
Yeah, there's a correlation coefficient for FastBridge that's at least as high as MAP testing, and it's all about forecasting. In that way you could think about it as forecasting for the MCA. So although I wouldn't compare MCA and FastBridge results to each other, like I would always use them as a way to think about our progress that we're making toward MCA results. Does that make sense?
It does. That's why I'm concerned. So we see 16, 17, 17, 18, et cetera on this. When we replace the last year with the FBL versus the way we have been testing, they will be pre-correlated. So we won't be seeing a difference that's not something we can see a progress report on, in other words, through the years.
I think I may have misspoken. The scorecard actually only has MCA results, and it does not include any MAP results. So they're on the scorecard.
Okay.
There wouldn't be any differences in the measures that are used.
Okay.
Internally, because we need something that's tracking our progress during the school year, we'll be using FastBridge.
Okay. Okay.
And I don't anticipate FastBridge results being part of our scorecard. So we're looking at the highest overview
Okay, so we're
summary
still going
data.
to see MCAs as soon as we can
Yep.
take them. All
It's
right,
just X's in the year that it didn't happen.
understand.
And we have nothing. There's no district that was able to do any testing.
In Chrisland, might some of the indicators in SCIPS be the Fast Bridge Learning?
Yes, exactly, that's right. So
And
like
I'm
some
sorry, in the school-
some school improvement plan goals, yes, would be related around that because teachers want to be able to, because there's nothing to kind of benchmark or baseline those goals on from the spring. We need to use something from the fall.
Understand, you need something to inform what
Right, what a
needs to
goal
be
might
improved
be.
upon, what's doing well. I get it. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions?
And I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. The only other connection that I'd like to make is, I know we talked earlier about the flexible instruction days on Wednesdays. And isn't some of the Fast Bridge data also being used to help determine students who might need some additional support? And we want to be sure that we see them more in schools?
That's correct, that's right.
Forward to your report later on.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Take care.
Now we'll move on to the Big Sky Development Monument request. I don't know who's doing that. Maureen?
In lieu of Jim.
Jeff.
Yes, Jeff and Maureen in lieu of Jim.
Yes, we're here this evening on behalf of Mr. Delwo. Earlier this fall, we received a request from Big Sky Development for an easement to install a neighborhood monument that would distinguish Big Sky Development. That topic and request did come to the Facilities Committee, where it was discussed. The outcome of the committee was to bring it forward to the board for presentation, but also the recommendation of the committee was to not grant this request. Just a couple things to point out. Coming in off of County Road 27 on 157th, where Hamilton Ridge is, the entire north side of the road is ball field. You've got the landscaped berm, thank you, and which carries all the way up to the school, and then you start getting into the school portion of our property. There doesn't appear to be any logical place that we would put that monument that in some ways might confuse the school property that's there. We currently do not have, I believe, any other situations in the district where this is the case, where we have monuments that indicate neighborhoods. And so that did lead to this recommendation from the Facilities Committee to deny this request, but also to bring it forward to the board this evening for discussion. So with that, I would open it up to our board members who serve on the Facility Committee to add any comments or just a report out from that committee.
Basically, what you said is accurate to our discussion. I really don't have anything else to add, and I support the recommendation. So, Mary, did you have anything else to add?
No, I just wanted to point out that people in that particular subdivision had requested it. It was a community-driven one from that subdivision. But I am in agreement that putting a monument for that one subdivision would be confusing to the Hamilton Ridge Elementary School, and also point out that the Hamilton Ridge Elementary School obviously services a lot more than just that subdivision, so that would make it equally more confusing as well as limiting. And that's why I do not support the request from the community to put, the local subdivision community to put a monument on our property, especially so close to the school.
Other board members have any comments? Okay with our recommendation?
I support the recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Move on to board governance policy. Our first item is open forum during a pandemic. There was a request to review our current practice, which our current practice right now is that written statements are given to Martha Walls by noon on the date of our meeting. And as board chair, I will read them during the open forum section of our meeting. I encourage the board to continue with this practice during the pandemic due to the restrictions for safety of all concerned. We have a limited number of staff in the room now. We have to limit any guest visitors, and we have to continue social distancing. MSBA supports this practice and has given us guidance to follow MDE and MDH. And it is, we are unable, actually, I've checked on this, and we are unable to have virtual, how do I say it? People join virtually for an open forum. So I would encourage everyone to continue to support this practice. Unless there's any other comments, we'll move on to the next topic.
I just have one question and one comment. First of all, and I get it. I'm the one who brought this up because we usually have an open forum when we're here in person, and people come, they can hear the full meeting and participate, and potentially some of them change what they're going to say after they talk to others when they get in here, et cetera. But I am a little concerned that we haven't seen any of those statements come in, and if we're being open enough and encouraging enough to members of our district community to let them know that this is the policy, that we are encouraging them also to participate in one way, shape, or form. You know, I'm not sure if it's intimidating to have everything written, if people are familiar with, you know, or comfortable with having somebody else read it. I don't know how to encourage community engagement that way through the forum with the way we've been doing it, because we haven't had anybody do it. And I don't know if that's a discussion item we want to continue to maybe encourage people.
I believe it is on the documentation. Well, I know it's on the documentation when we send out for the board agendas. I think it might be on our website. I'm not positive of that, but I think it is on there that they can send information in. I understand what you're saying. I'm sure they'd rather come and make their own statement. But honestly, most people, when they come, they've got a piece of paper, they're reading it anyway. And we have had one that I remember. But at this time, I would agree. I'd love to have more people be able to come in and do it, but it's not feasible for us to do that at this point. So I think all we can do is continue to encourage people, either verbally or encourage them to make sure they're looking at the website, following with the agenda. That's all we can do.
It's not feasible to have them schedule ahead of time to open up the virtual, I mean, given the way we're doing them right now, to allow an individual to come in even for just, or 5 minutes if they schedule it with Martha or whatever time frame it is. Yes.
I am told that would not work.
Okay.
We cannot do that.
Well, all right then.
Okay, then we'll move on to board policy review. This is policy 603, which also kind of goes along with 616, curriculum development and school district system accountability. I believe that, they're both up here. I think the intent of bringing these policies back up for review, I don't think they're on the cycle right now, but to bring them back was to make sure that they're accurate and that we have what we're currently doing is actually what's in the policy. And part of that had to do with the makeup of the membership of the committee and the committee numbers, that those are accurate.
Want to speak to the membership?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll speak, good evening, everyone. I'll speak broadly to the District Curriculum Advisory Committee membership. We are working currently to expand the numbers of parents on the committee. We're soliciting through all elementary and secondary schools to get more parents on the committee in the goal of reaching that 2/3 parents on the committee. That will be the goal. We'll see if it will be possible. That will make our meetings all virtual this year until health conditions change or guidance changes on that due to capacity limitations, but we hope to get back in person as soon as we can. We're also going to be inviting the District Curriculum Advisory Committee members to be a part of curriculum review meetings whenever possible so that they can see some of the work, decisions, thought going into it while the teachers and the curriculum review committee members are thinking through that and working through that process. You'll also see in the first DCAC meeting of this year that there's going to be an increased involvement of DCAC members in the World's Best Workforce process, in reviewing the data early on, to having kind of a deeper dive than you can do at a board meeting with Kristen Goodman and with the entire committee, and having some input and feedback into the goal-setting process as well.
Stacy?
What about student? I think there was something about student involvement. So is there a number we're looking for there, or how we're?
Ideally, at least a couple secondary students. You know, we'll do everything we can. This is a committee that we often, you know, try to expand, and we get as many people as we can. I am encouraged by some parent interest so far when we sent out the form. I want to say we have about 6 or 7 people interested so far. So, and then we also sent out the form in conjunction with an interest form for SEEK, the Special Education Advisory Committee. So we have some people who are interested in both as well.
Michael?
I was just going to ask too, because of some of the work we've been doing, if there's sort of an eye on diversity too in terms of representation in the committee.
Absolutely. So even some of the work that's already been done, that started last year, before the pandemic, before, you know, the events of this last summer, that was a goal that our curriculum review committee team members identified in English and social studies, and I imagine in everything else that will come through.
Great, thank you.
And we've also taken action on that already this year, and you'll see some of that different curriculum offerings this year even.
Fabulous, thank you.
You're welcome.
Gary?
Well, first of all, I concur with Kevin. I think that they've made a tremendous effort in reaching out in the past 2, 3 years, 4 years actually, that I've been on the curriculum committee to encourage diversity and to increase that representation. They can't always make it to the meetings, but they're definitely on the list and invited, and hopefully gaining more. I've got a couple of questions, because I know that we discussed this quite a bit in our data retreat, and a couple of things. One of the issues that we kind of talked about, and this is kind of a combined one, we talked particularly about the makeup of the curriculum committee, the purpose of the curriculum committee compared to what we originally had in there and what the standards were. Actually having it engaged, like you said, I understand that the way we're going to make up for that is to actually have the members of the DAC actually attend other meetings, not try to do it double, which is a great thing for the timing and also for the time commitment. But I do, you know, one of the things that I've been pushing for since I got on the curriculum committee is greater representation by the board itself. So I asked for 3, I got an additional one last couple of years. You know, we have 3 people on the FLRP committee, we have 3 on the legislative, we have 3 on the community engagement, and curriculum is one of the core pillars of what the board does. Also, it is incredibly informative. We left it at 1 member on this. Is there a reason for that, even though now we have 2?
Well, I think that those are established with board committees.
I actually also think there's a statute, and I can't quote the number or whatever, but there is a statute that says that there has to be a ratio proportion to administration versus community. Sorry, but I don't have that exact number. So if we put 2 board members on there, we need that many more community members. If we put 3, it just gets bigger. And I'm not sure how functional that would be after time. So we have to follow that statute. So
That 2/3 number.
okay.
Well, the 2/3 number, I didn't read that as being a percentage of board members. I thought, you know, we kind of talked about the 2/3 number.
It's administrators to community members.
Okay,
And board members are considered part of school district staff when they're
Okay.
looking at that, according to
right.
who I talked to.
And I think what we also talked about, and that was confusing to me too, because based upon the representation from the secondary, the assistant principals, you know, Jeff, you show up to that, and Kevin, you're both administrators. We definitely outnumbered community by far overall, even without the extra board presence. And I'm not, and so I kind of interpreted the invitation to go to the individual community meetings is, and the additional potential community support between the 2 of them is hoping to mitigate that to a certain degree.
I hope so. I mean, I hope we have, I'm enthusiastic and, you know, about the interest so far. I'm gonna reach out to every person, kind of make sure they understand the commitment, the time commitments, the general meeting schedule. I'm also kind of enthusiastic about the fact that we are forced into virtual meetings this year, and that I think it may make participation easier for some people who may, you know, have childcare challenges or things like that. So that may make it easier, and it may be something we continue to do in the future, even because of that, and make it an option or a hybrid kind of scenario or something like that. But yeah, I mean, our goal is to make this as open and transparent a committee as possible, and that we can get as many people to participate meaningfully as possible. You know, there is sort of a limit to, you know, to your point, Lee, where you hit, if you have too many people, it can't really be a functional, meaningful participation.
And, you know, the background behind this was that it was to get the community involved, to have them have input without coming into a room and all of a sudden the board is a decision maker and the administrators as management and running, you know, running these programs, that they would not have any kind of say.
Right.
So we have to be careful of that parameter, not to say that curriculum is important, it's more important than some of the other committees that we serve on, potentially. So I get that, but we have to be careful as to how many people are on it.
Yep.
And how bulky it gets to be. So,
I will, if I may, I will concur with Mary that I think it's a really valuable, it was valuable for me to participate. Simply, there's nothing in my first 2 years where I learned more than curriculum committee, right? And that's not, plenty of others will come into board director roles where they're coming out of the business world, and this is, you know, it's not our background. So I like the fact that we added a second. I was happy to participate this past year. Again, I think we do need to be sensitive to what's there for ratios.
and that hasn't changed when I was on curriculum. It's a great committee to be on.
Yeah.
We just can't have all of us on it.
My concern is we're not meeting the ratios now by any stretch, and I was hoping that maybe if we get the virtual meeting going, that could help, but also, you know, by the time we get to these, usually 4 to 5 meetings a year, we're really just getting this, a more detailed presentation and then what goes to the board. And what's valuable is hearing the questions and being able to ask questions of more of the leads in the different departments and the different areas. So again, I noticed that we crossed out the final document on phase 2 of section A there and went to the summary document, assuming though that again, involvement in the more granular committee and the introduction of virtual participation will then make the actual committee meetings where we currently have Jonathan and I attending, that would be more appropriate for the summary. But as we've experienced, an hour and a half or an hour and 15 minutes for those, we rarely get through the entire agenda, particularly when we only have an hour and 15 minutes and we only meet 4 times a year, and the topics can be fairly in-depth, very, very illuminating, necessary, and boy, did I learned a lot from that, and I hope to continue. So that's, if you could potentially drill down a little bit into the higher level committee versus the lower level committee so we can understand the difference between those on record. And like I said, I'm hoping that will mitigate the higher level committee summaries.
Absolutely.
These committees are also meant to, as I said, to get input from the community. There are other curriculum meetings. We don't just have 4 or 5 a year. So these are made more to share information. It's not to actually figure out how to do the curriculum for the school district. So I just want to make that clear, that it's information sharing to the community and to get input from the community. Good to have board members on there to hear from the community members that are there that have been paying attention to what's actually going on in curriculum, so.
I will just add too that we have been really intentional over the last 2 years, I would say, to really bring students into the individual curriculum review meetings so that they can share their experience with ELA, for example, or our Native American Parent Committee presented to our social studies curriculum review team, and it's transformative. When our community members, our parents, in that exact step of the process share what their experience is like as parents. That's when some of the real change happens. And I'm hopeful by inviting and making those meetings also available for DCAC members, you'll be able to see a little bit more of that and perhaps participate.
So that would make up for exactly what Lee was talking about, but the individual meetings that the board is not necessary, the member assigned to this curriculum committee is not necessarily in there, but it also mitigates the percentages if more than one board member can show up, and I would highly recommend that.
Yep, thank you.
So you'll go back and look at these and come back with more detail on that membership?
Absolutely.
Okay. All
And
right.
soon I will actually share the DCAC roster for the year too.
Perfect.
In, I believe, the next board meeting.
Okay, we'll move on then to no first readings of policies. Second reading, these are policies that have been reviewed on August 24th, first reading September 14th, second reading tonight, with projected board approval on October 12th. The first policy is 203, school board operating norms. I was directed to consult with legal counsel, and I will share, actually you have a document in front of you, and I think it's in the board packet too, but there's a hard copy in front of you for some of the areas that we were discussing with 4.3 and 5.6. And according to his legal opinion, the wording has changed a little bit. The blue is the highlighted areas. He strongly supports that it should be clarifications of questions through the superintendent and board chair. Exceptions exist for allegations of illegal conduct, harassment, or discrimination of the board chair or superintendent. I think that's a little bit of what you were looking at, Mary, last time. And then on 5.6, when board members receive questions and concerns from members of the community or employees, it is necessary to follow the chain of command. They shall direct the individual to the appropriate administrator in the district, or the superintendent if appropriate administrator is unknown. Those are the big ones that we were discussing last time that you asked me to get legal counsel on. Stacy, did you have anything you wanted to add in this?
No, I think, I think his spin on this, just on like 4.4, was around work direction, being given to an employee that's under Dr. Stoller's preview, that would, he basically said it would be of no consequence to the individual, meaning, he said it would put them in a bad position. They don't have to listen basically to what we're saying because you're not, they're not your employee. So, and it's just a challenge to the individual. So he had recommended this, this wording, and I think it kind of clears up what, the situation that we were talking about.
Mary?
So I agree with following the chain of command. Does that contradict 4.4? So if the request comes in, aren't we supposed to send them through the chain of command? Or are we supposed to immediately send them to the superintendent, et cetera, with the exception and the board chair, even though potentially we should be telling the individual, please contact your principal if you haven't done so already? I'm just wondering if there's a conflict there with the general statement in the first sentence for 4.4 and 5.6, because 5.6 makes a lot more sense.
Well, 5.6, I think, is talking about you're getting outside questions and concerns. 4.4 is when you're making the request.
Okay,
So it's two different, you know what I'm saying? So it's.
Okay, their request is the
Yes,
key, okay.
I
Just
think-
want to clarify.
Yeah, it's just 5.6 allows for the facilitation of, hey, I know who this administrator is, or you need to contact your principal,
Okay.
and it's the appropriate chain of command.
Right.
And that way, I think, too, in 5.6, you can at least have you know, some conversation too with the, community member in the sense that you can say, here's your appropriate person. If you haven't talked to them, then please come, you know, come back to me if you're not getting that, and I will facilitate, you know. That way it's at least allowing for you to have some accountability back to the community and, and that, yeah.
Well, I agree, based upon that clarification, and also after rereading it a few times here. I like the changes that was made as a result of discussing with legal counsel. I think that makes a lot more sense, and it satisfies my concerns.
Any other?
Well, and I think we just want to reiterate the fact that, I know it's in a different policy, but 209, the same question as far as 5.6 was in 209 as well, so we just took that same wording and put it right over there so that we
It's
had
in the ethics 209.
It's in the
that was only
ethics too,
change
so
there.
that there's clarity and it's consistent.
All right.
Otherwise, the rest of the policy, I believe, was acceptable. Does anyone have any other questions on this policy? Okay, I'm going to skip to 209 because it is the same, the change that, for 5.6, it's referring to the same kind of situation. So if you want to look at 209, if you have any other questions on that one?
That'd be the only change.
That is the only change, yep.
I'm good with that. That's
Okay. Then we'll go back to policy 204, school board member violation of policy. Let's see. In this discussion, we had some samples that have been put in here. There was one that Mary had gotten. I'm not sure where that came from. There's one from Edina, one from Stillwater, and one from Roseville. And then there's the state statute that's included. As we review them, the ones from the other school districts are very similar to ours. Some have more steps than others. I want to caution everyone that this policy isn't meant to be, initially anyway, a punishment. It's more of a learning tool, especially with, you know, new board members coming on. They may make a mistake, and it's not to be punished as much as it is to educate them on how to be proper board member, how to follow the governance rules in our role. And I believe that the way we want to, that it might be possible to lay this out so that it is more of a learning tool. If it continues, if it's repetitive, if it's purposefully done, then the state statute will come into play or further repercussions. I don't know where you want to go with it. If you want to add on more steps, like Stillwater and Roseville, theirs is pretty clear and direct. There's some good wording in Edina's. I'll open it up for discussion. Okay, no discussion.
I want to comment, I appreciate your comment about sort of the intent behind this being more coaching, I think would be another word to use than some form of punishment. I think it's important to remember the spirit of all of these policies is to create a collaborative environment where we work together, where we're all working, again, we're all working toward the same goal as we heard earlier tonight. And I think if we're looking at this as a way to help people learn how the role is and how some of these things work as a growth tool as opposed to some sort of a punishment, I think it's important to have that frame of mind when we are considering this.
And I would like to add to that, that's not the way it's been done before. So if we agree to move forward with that type of non-punitive, because my experience was exactly the opposite. And it wasn't even close to being legal either. So so I would appreciate the steps, because it's important. So first of all, with any procedure, it's important to be consistent. okay, and have the documentation. So I would appreciate a procedure. The other thing that happens is because we have an executive committee and all that, we have to be fair with each other because we're really on the same page. So what I like about some of the procedures that have been done is it actually deals with procedures for, let's say, when members that would be normally making the decision are involved or something like that. So it's fair, it's consistent, it's the steps that people can say is kind of auditable in a way. So did you do this? Check. Did we do this? Check. It isn't necessarily kind of up in the air with those types of information. And when there is an exception that comes in place, that we have an exception procedure, at least something that we can talk about when something like that happens. So that's what I kind of like about having a little bit more of a prescriptive approach to this type of scenario.
I don't think we're trying to get rid of the steps. I mean, if we're going to continue this policy, I mean, there is a statute. We don't have to have this policy. I like this. I like the idea of having the policy because it helps. It is a learning tool. It can help. When it becomes repetitive or purposeful, then it becomes more of an issue.
Right.
So I don't think anyone is suggesting, I may be putting words in your mouth, Jonathan, but I'm not suggesting anyway that we get rid of any steps. The other school districts have a lot more steps than we do, and I'm not sure how many steps or how complicated we want to make this. And honestly, these steps are going to lead up to the statute. It's not we start with the statute and then go back and try and fix it. Because this is a non-issue if we can all trust each other and respect each other's position and the work that we do on the board. It's, most of these things aren't even going to come forward. A lot more has to do with learning. We're going to have at least 2 new board members. So, when they do something that they think is the right thing to do and find out that it's a violation of our policy, I don't think anybody should be coming down on them, except to say, hey, that's not the way you can do it. And that's what I'd like to see happen more of. And again, I'm repeating myself, but if it becomes more repetitive and deliberate, that's different. Then you have to step forward more and maybe be more direct.
Well, the only
And
place
maybe
is-
that's where more steps come into place.
The only place the statute really talks about a vacancy other than or how to handle it or what would constitute a vacancy in more prescriptive terms is somebody's can't be there for 90 days or is misses 90 days, et cetera. And then the statement where you can remove somebody is really nebulous. It really pulls back on that local control issue. I believe that we kind of decide the procedure within there. So this, say we can follow statute here is, like a lot of statutes having to do with school boards, particularly in this state where we have local control, it pretty much pushes it back onto the districts themselves.
Right, so the first part of the statute for probable cause or probable reasons or something like that is the word, that's on us.
Right.
And the statute with the 90 days, if you're unable to fulfill your position for 90 days, that's very definite in the statute. We did ask the lawyer about that as well, and his opinion was that the statute for the probable cause is purposely
nebulous.
Vague, nebulous, to leave it back to the school district to see, what they want to do to have steps. He also said that it's not necessary that we have this policy, but encouraged that it might be a good idea to have some kind of process leading up to that. Michael?
I don't know if it would be helpful, Mary, in the wording of our policy, if we want to put something like the goal of this policy is, educational, and I like the wording that the Edina sample used. The board and each of its members are committed to faithful compliance with board policies. And I think for the community who's listening, these 200 policies are self-governance for the board. It's how we hold ourselves accountable to what we say we're going to follow. And the board recognizes that its failure to deal with deliberate or continuing violations of its policies risks loss of confidence in the board's ability to govern effectively. And this I think speaks to what we're talking about. The purpose of these parameters and steps is to attempt to resolve any perceived violations at the lowest possible level involving the fewest number of individuals. So really, if that is a discussion with just between two people or whatever the goal is, to do it with as little as possible, but that we hold each other accountable as colleagues to what we said we're going to do. So I don't know if some wording like that would feel better too, to say, you know, because school boards just don't take people off. It just doesn't, it rarely happens in Minnesota. I found maybe one case. It just, people don't get to that point. But maybe with that sort of wording in the beginning help, like the goal of this is just to help each other stay true to what we promised, and here's how we'll deal with it if we see repeated violations.
Well,
Help?
well, okay, so the Edina, very few, if any, have a policy actual number 204 that's only dedicated to violation. Usually it is combined like Edina did.
Yep.
And a few others, they don't actually have that. So I want to make that clarification. But just adding that language, you still have how, if you have a complaint about somebody, what the intake is it submitted in writing? And it should be, okay? Can we accept anonymous complaints? And so there's a process in here that says whether you can or not. And then it talks about how you actually investigate or scope it. Now, before that, you can say, okay, if this was, you know, something that somebody did on accident or whatever, let's say somebody accidentally copied more people than they should on an email, and therefore that's a potential violation of open meeting law. You keep doing that, obviously, then you have to go through these steps. And then you would save the emails and say, okay, here's the problem. We keep telling you that's not okay, and you keep doing it, that sort of thing. So I think that as a preamble to soften just the draw steps would be helpful, but I do think we need a process, otherwise it can be all over the board of what kicks something off, and having something, particularly when it comes to this is more prescriptive, it also protects the district and the board, I believe, in cases where it's legally challenged, because that's expensive. And if you have that consistency, you have something where there's rules or something like that applied, you don't have to be really down to every single level detail. But something like that would be not only defensible, but decrease the preponderance of somebody saying, hey, this isn't fair, or whatever. You know, and the example policy that I gave is a combination of a lot of the different school districts as well as outside of the state. I put a lot more in here than needed to be because I wasn't sure what people were comfortable with. I figured it's easier to take something out than put something in. But I do think we need some sort of step-by-step process of how we would actually document the issue.
I would like to suggest that this is the third time this has come to the board, and we have a lot of samples to work with. I know that policy is a board-level process, but because of the nature of policies and wordsmithing and laying them all out, if the board is willing, if we could get 2, no more than 3 volunteers that would be willing to work on comparing these policies and come up with a process moving forward, unless you want to keep talking about this at a number of meetings coming up. I don't see there being a resolution at this point.
More than happy to do it.
Who wants to, Stacy?
Yep.
Anybody else?
I totally agree with that. And I was kind of hoping we'd get to that point because there's no way we're going to go through line by line in any one of these
Well,
meetings.
I mean, is there some that we can narrow down right now out of these that we could, like, if people are,
I guess that I would leave to this subcommittee to do.
I would
I mean, I think the general feeling, I think we're hearing from most everyone, the general feeling of, yes, we want a process, yes, we want it to be somewhat of a learning process. At some point, when it becomes repetitive and, you know, continually violating our policies, there needs to be some process
A
that we go
remedy.
through.
I mean, I think at that point, yeah, you're gonna need to, I mean, in my opinion, would need it to be reviewed by the lawyer, just whatever our final policy is. Just because I would wanna make sure that we're not in violation of something. You know, we can't really run our own investigations.
Well, one thing he did say today to us is that if, you know, because school board members are not employees, if it would ever get to that level, it would be discussed at an open meeting.
Correct.
if you're an employee, it can be a closed meeting or you have a choice. That's, to me, is way farther down the road
Right.
to what we
I'm just
need
saying,
to
at
be
some
doing.
point, you're gonna need a legal review of whatever we put in.
And I think we could look at that when the time comes if we need to do that. But who would want to work on this with Stacy?
I mean, I will.
Did you say you would? Okay. Anyone else?
I think we can only have 3 at a time, right?
3 is all you
Oh,
can have.
Enrique?
Okay.
If he wants
Enrique.
that, oh, Enrique.
Enrique raised his hand, all right.
I
All
raised
right.
my hand.
Okay, Enrique, Mary, and Stacy, if you would be able to compare these policies and put something together for us, we might have a more productive discussion the next time. As we need to move on with our policies, we stalled out on our own policies. Okay, moving on, superintendent relations, Dr. Sala, did you have anything to add?
Nothing this evening, thank you.
Okay, I don't really have anything either. I do know that Board Scholar Night would normally be coming up, and the high school is looking at other options on how that can be done. Pretty much for sure will not be done in person. There'll be some type of either virtual or they'll just be able to pick up their pins and things like that. And hopefully in the near future, we'll be able to have something more formal for them. So just to let you know that they're working on that process. I will adjourn. Oh, I don't have anybody from the public that wanted to speak. So we'll adjourn the study session, and I'll call the meeting to order in 5 minutes at 8:35.